يا غزة الأحرار ثوري ثوري على الفجار
I'd like to start with a poem by Kamal Nassar. Kamal Nassar was a poet, a militant. He was assassinated, a member of the PLO, and he was assassinated in 1973. His work is The Story. I will tell you a story. A story that lived in the dreams of people. A story built in the darkness of my country, built out of hunger and out of the darkness of my country, which is only a handful of refugees. Every 20 persons with a pound of flour and promises of a relief, parcels and gifts. It is the story of the oppression of a group who stood in hunger for 10 years, in tears and agony, in hardship and yearning. It was the story of a people led astray, who were thrown down into the mazes of the years. But they defied and stood, disrobed and united, and went to the light of the tents, a return of the revolution in a world of darkness. Kamal Nassar.
يا غزة الأحرار ثوري على الفجار يا
The second poem I'd like to present is a poem from the Palestinian diaspora, written by Remi Kanazi, who wrote a book entitled Before the Next Bomb Drops, Rising Up from Brooklyn to Palestine, and was published in 2015 by Haymarket Books. I never knew death till I saw the bombing of a refugee camp. Craters filled with disfigured ankles and splattered torsos. No sign of a face. The only impression, a fading screen. I never knew pain until a 7-year-old girl clutched my hand and looked up at me with soft brown eyes, waiting for answers. But I didn't have any. I had muted breath and dry pens in my back pocket, which could never fill pages of resolutions or understandings. And in her other hand, she held the key to her grandmother's house. But I couldn't unlock the cell that caged her older brothers. They said, "We slingshot dreams to the other side so they might feel our Father's presence." A craftsman who built houses where no one else was building. And when he fell, he was silent. A .50 caliber bullet tore through his neck, shredding his vocal cords. Too close to the wall. His hammer must have been a weapon. He must have been a weapon. Encroaching on settlement hills and demographics. His daughter studies mathematics. 7 explosions times 8 people equals 4 congressional resolutions. 7 Apache helicopters times 8 Palestinian villages equals silence and the new Nakba. Our birth rate minus their birth rate equals 1C and 400 re-erected villages. 1 state and 2 peoples. But she can't stop crying. She doesn't know the proper equation, tearing at the paper with her fingertips, looking for answers that has only teachers. She looks up in the sky and sees the stars of David demolishing squalor with hellfire missiles. She thinks back words and music of his last hug before he turned and fell. And now she draws dirty water from a well, and settlements divide and conquer, and her father's killer sits beachfront with a European vernacular. She thinks back while they think backward of obscene notions and indigenous confusions. "This is our land," she said. She's only 7 years old. "This is our land." And she doesn't need a school book or history teacher. She has these walls, this sky, her refugee camp. She doesn't have the proper equation. but she sees the dry pens in my pocket, no longer looking for answers, just holding her grandmother's keys, searching for ink.
ثوري على الفجار هيا قذيفي بالنار يا أحفاد صهيوني هيا قذيفي بالنار يا أحفاد صهيوني يا غزة الأحرار ثوري على الفجار يا غزة الأحرار ثوري على الفجار هيا قذيفي بالنار يا أحفاد صهيوني هيا قذيفي بالنار يا أحفاد صهيوني.
Thank you, Endre and Carolyn, for organizing this event. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm honored to be sharing the poetry of Hala Alyan. I chose her not only for the beauty of her words, but also for their rawness and honesty and their ability to carry us across continents and generations with all the nuances of identity, displacement, and resilience. And on a more personal note, being a mixed-race Muslim woman, navigating issues of identity has been an integral part of my life. And though our journeys are different, her poetry has provided me with validation and understanding. I've also always been drawn to the intersection of psychology and literature. And Hala Alyan, being a clinical psychologist, I feel like she seamlessly weaves together both worlds. So tonight, let us draw strength from her poetry and the stories that they carry. Let us be reminded of the power of empathy, compassion, and solidarity in creating positive change in the lives of others. And may her words inspire us to continue to strive for a brighter and more compassionate future. So I will read 2 of her poems, and then I will read some of my own. The first poem is The Socratic Method. It's from the 29th year. The Socratic Method. That last morning of December, I asked my father if he ever has nightmares. My father said no. He's as lonely as Wyoming, a perfect country for no one to see. Baba, did you want the tailgating, the silver Dodge, the dog you fed waffles? No wonder I can only love 2 men at a time. No wonder I threw away every instrument I touched. In the mornings I clutch my chest and chant, God forbid, God forbid. I have dreamt your death 1,000 times. You were born for this, to haggle over café tables, lining up for the donut peaches in Vierzon's market. It takes a romantic to leave a city. I understand this now. Those cardboard boxes, how they opened faithfully for you, little brown hearts, how they carried everything you would ask of them. This second poem was published in the New Yorker in November 2021. It's called Topography. The land is a crick in the neck. An orange grove burns and it's sour when you burp. Whose voice is that? There's a fable. There's a key. Every Ramadan, the artery suffers first. A diet of heavy lamb and checkpoint papers. Indigestion like a nightmare. The tourist sun burns your forehead. I mean the land. The land looks white on the MRI images. You call your grandfather. He's been finding the land in his stool. His body contours the mattress like a coffin. His hand trembles. When he drinks the land, the urine comes out rose-colored. The land sears the esophagus. No more lemons, the doctor says. 2 pillows at least. In July, you lived inside your grandfather like a settlement. You ate currant sorbet from the same cup. Did you inherit the land in your arthritic wrist? It makes knitting hell. On the telephone, your grandfather tells you the land is coating his eyes. He tells you it is worth being alive just to see that blue. He dies, and they harness his body to the dirt. He dies, and the sun is out all week.
ولتأخذي بالثار يا غزاة الأطهار ولتأخذي بالثار يا غزاة الأطهار من غارات الكفار عباد أفيوني من غارات الكفار عباد أفيوني فليصمود الأبرار مهما قاوى التيار فليصمود الأبرار مهما قاوى التيار وسينصار الإسلام ويطيب زيتوني.
So this is George Abraham's poem, Love Letter to the Eve of the End of the World. Every generation has once considered themselves survivors at the end of a world. Doomsday clock, nuclear countdown, and the walls came tumbling. Unveiling of singe and gas chamber, trench warfare, history, the body we slice through and never something to live in to survive. How many times have we assumed ourselves writing from apocalypse and not towards it? Modernity is a failed project I type into the silicon expanse of my galaxy. If it would mean a return to a world where we bury our dead whole, where light was not rewritten into a night sky's apology, where land was returned to only land, like high water returned to merely ocean, then, I beg, let us fall with the unquiet dead slaughtered by our own gaslight. The flora wilting over the gazelle's footprints, trailing to the edge of a cliff. Extinction where once was whole air, do not mistake this for despair. The only way I can love the whole of us is to stare into the center of our unmaking and learn to love the worlds made possible in our own fall. We can bend countries like branches until they break. Or sever, instead, the roots of the ever-knowing tree, the need for an ecosystem to call Eden. Elsewhere, a new history of touch, not pitted against the land. Elsewhere, our teeth sinking into the soft flesh of a fruit without mourning. Thank you.
فلتغلق الأبواب ولتطفئ الأنوار فلتغلق الأبواب ولتطفئ الأنوار.
My grandfather was a terrorist. He tended to his field, watered the roses in the courtyard, smoked cigarettes with grandmother on the yellowish seashore, lying like a prayer rug. My grandfather was a terrorist. He picked oranges and lemons, fished with brothers until noon, sang a comforting song en route to the farriers with his piebald horse. My grandfather was a terrorist. He made a cup of tea with milk, sat on his verdant land as soft as silk, was incensed at the sun as it kept to blink. My grandfather was a terrorist. He departed his house for the coming guests, kept some water on the table, his best, lest the guests die of thirst after their conquest. My grandfather was a terrorist. He walked to the closest safe town, dark as the sullen sky, vacant as a deserted tent, darkling as a starless night. My grandfather was a terrorist. My grandfather was a man, a breadwinner for 10, whose luxury was to have a tent with a blue UN flag set on the rusting pole on the beach next to a cemetery.
أو أحرقوا بالنار زرعي وليموني أو أحرقوا بالنار زرعي وليموني مهلنا يا فجار ترميكم الأحجار مهلنا يا فجار ترميكم الأحجار سأذيقكم بالنار كما أذقتوني سأذيقكم بالنار كما أذقتوني لن يعبر التيار أبدا بلا إبحار لن يعبر التيار أبدا بلا إبحار بالجد والإصرار.
And I'm going to start off by reading a poem by Dalia Toha, as translated by Lina Tufaha, and has a fantastic title. It's called The Man and His Girlfriend Who Argued All of Last Night and Now Stand at a Pharmacy in Our City to buy medication for headaches. But it's also a poem that is quite profound. Look, over there. The sea is invisible yet, though we've been driving for 2 hours. Though we've begun to feel its hot, moist air. Though our clothes are sticking to our bodies. In the car, we eat grapes and don't talk, as if the sweat oozing from our bodies is how we communicate now, how our souls trade words or strikes. We're on Highway 6. I'm on the phone making sure we don't take the wrong exit. You're asking me to pass you something. And with the same heads that crossed the checkpoint, the same neutral expressions that waited while the soldier looked over our papers, we turn to take in the empty hills. Completely empty. There's nothing that speaks of the Arab villages, I note, and you nod your beautiful head. Even the silence that envelops the scene after a massacre and never leaves it, the silence that clings to the rocks and trees and is released by the soil like fumes, that particular kind of heavy silence. You know what I mean. You sense it when you visit the hills of Rwanda or Bosnia. You feel it instantly. You don't understand how it happens exactly, but you move backwards as though you aren't stepping on grass, but on the gasps of the dead. As if what extends from the trees aren't branches, but the dead's last words, standing upright, crows alighting on them. They tried to get rid of the silence with highways and the thrum of moving cars. They tried skillfully to remove everything. Then they tossed their white gloves on the grass. I feel like I'm performing, like nothing about what I'm doing is real. As if what I'm wearing underneath my clothes isn't a bathing suit, but a ghost. No one can return those villages to the hillside. It's over forever. This is a fixed truth. I realize this on the way to this sea, and a strange grief fills me. The sea that is invisible yet, as if it, too, knows and has disappeared, and nothing but the sweat oozing from our bodies tells us it's there. And because words between us have come to an end, without saying it out loud, together we long to meet it, while the white gloves on the hills slowly grow into poison flowers. Ramallah. That was Dalia Taha.
ولتأخذي بالثار يا غزاة الأطهار ولتأخذي بالثار يا غزاة الأطهار من غارات الكفار عباد أفيوني من غارات الكفار عباد أفيوني فليصمد الأبرار مهما قاوى التيار فليصمد الأبرار مهما قاوى التيار وسينصر الإسلام ويطيب زيت.
Okay, How I Killed Soldiers by Ahlam Bsharat. How I Killed Soldiers. Colonial soldiers, what have they been doing to my poetry all these years, when I could have easily killed them in my poems, as they've killed my family outside poetry? Poetry was my chance to settle score with the killers, but I let them age indoors, and I want them to know decay in their lives, their faces to wrinkle, their smiles to thin out, and their weapons to hunch over. So if you, dear readers, see a soldier taking a stroll in my poem, trust that I have left him to his fate, as I leave a criminal to his many remaining years, that they will execute him. And his ears will execute him as he listens to me reciting my poem to grieving families. He won't be able to slink out of my book or the reading hall as the seated audience stares at him. You will not be consoled, soldier. You will not even as you exit my poetry event with slumped shoulders and pockets full of dead bullets. Even your hand, tremulous as it is from so much murder, fidgeting with the bullets, you will not produce more than a dead sound. Hala.
يا غزاة الأحرار ثوري على الفجار يا غزاة الأحرار ثوري.
This poem I wrote 2 months ago, and it was like a one-shot poem. Like I put it all in, I edited it a little bit, but then I didn't look back. It was kind of like an accumulation of everything I was feeling, and it's really encompassing of the last 6 months of this genocide. So this one is called Crying Rage. Every time I close my eyes, I watch Gaza's beach raging with a tsunami of blood. Raging with the blood of brothers murdered, raging with the innocence of our kite-flying kids, raging with the tears of righteousness of Gaza's sons and daughters. Gaza's colors are that of gold and revolutionary red. I paint my body in its colors until I am taken away too. I open my eyes to make more room for my tears again and again. I open my eyes and I am not done crying my own tsunami. My thoughts land on both a maple and an olive tree. I am dimensions far from home. I cry enough water to water all the trees, and I close my eyes once more, but my siblings cannot afford change like I do. And I want to remember the good, and I cannot survive otherwise. I relish in the far love of Gaza's glory, this time the most beautiful dream I will ever see. Gaza, you are my forever safe haven. I wish to die on your soil. Then the nightmares become more shaking than anything. And I cry myself to slumber another countless time. And I question whether lives are cut short or they were always short, and I cry to Allah, only He knows the answers to my suffering, and I close my eyes, Allah knows best. Screams pierce my ears and I vomit tears. My family continues to run from terror, and our horror is forever documented, and I am forever scarred. In the heart of Gaza, Every call feels like the last. Every message feels like the last. Every laugh feels like the last. And every prayer feels like the last. And I ache to survive and remind my body nothing will be the last. Nightmares seemed for sleepers way back when, but I am living in a collective torment and I cannot leave. And every time I wake up, my body forgets that it still has a people. That it still has a family. I lift my body up in a frenzy and I frantically think everyone is killed, and I begin my day reminding myself that the occupation has always snaked its way into stealing so much light from me, and I have never felt this much darkness. And grandfathers staring into their killed daughters' eyes, on daughters sheltering siblings, on siblings wailing for their mothers, on mothers' hysteria for their murdered sons, on sons' bloodshot eyes sobbing for the loss of their fathers, on fathers burying brothers, on brothers covered in the sisters' spilled blood, and I cry endlessly for us all. A montage of pain slithers its way into me every time I close my eyes, my forearms shake, trying to hold the rest of my body upright. And my family's faces run through my mind. Each face in a competition of remembrance. But how can I ever forget? How can I forget that the whole world is debating my pain when I am the only one feeling it? If it weren't for faith, I would have drowned in a flood of agony. If it weren't for hope, I would have drowned in a self-made storm. If it weren't for love, I would have drowned in a natural disaster of neglect. And if it weren't for Gaza, gently placing me back on its ancestral shores, time and time, again and again, I would have drowned in an abyss of forgottenness. I cry in rage and wait until my body is freed in the wake of liberation, where I am empty of nightmares, where I cry my final tsunami. So that one was dedicated to my family, genocide survivors. And this next one was written last year in honor of the 75th year of the Nakba. We are in our 76th year now. The Palestinian catastrophe is the Nakba of 1948, and it is dedicated to every single brother and sister in Gaza. Within a million nights, within 1,000,001 days, in a world running on borrowed time, seconds vanish into unforgotten history. And I find myself under Gaza's sun, letting me bask in the light it creates for me, swirling in a pool of holy water, reminding me of the multifacetedness of righteousness. Gaza extends its resilience, its streets powerfully paint me into a bold exclamation mark dipped in crimson blood. Defines me in the same world that already took the decision to shape me into a question mark. My Gaza was never of doubt. Despite the dormant beast in me, Gaza remains and reminds to be gracious. Flowering in every crevice of my soul, Gaza gave me a game plan of my place on this map, not Gulf or West Gaza. Was I born tired, or was tiredness seemed tauntingly into my body? Both. Days draw question marks onto my feet, more over and over. Though, born strong, mama walks with a lion's heart. How come I came out so full of Palestine? Baba laughs. Not a question, an eternal confirmation. He's proud, Gazan man, drives me to the border in the early morning, and Baba's love living proof of Gaza. I'm told by sons of home that of Gaza I do not know. I refuse to let go. Pre-devised enemy lines, inner battles and trying times. Gaza lets me lay my heart in its hands. What an honor to breathe in Gaza, and what an honor to be an ancestral daughter. Clutching onto the love of Palestine's kids, my fingers clutch onto the left side of the table at the ice cream place now demolished. In Gaza City, I see suburb mirrors here, remind me home is more than a mere reflection of history, and smooth cold ice cream place mirrors recount to me that life fighting for freedom is everlastingly sweet. Gaza my future, home lives, relive the joy, how tender. Teta's fingers draw resistance and exclamation marks into my hair. 6 in the morning, 6 birds sing in the garden of the mountain, and sons and daughters rush to greet the question mark girl for the first time. And I lay by Teta's cedar tree forever, and I lay by Teta's lemon tree forever. Ripe age of 9, 9 and none more, I know Gaza is mine. My body sits restlessly on a birthplace subway seat. My body sits steadily on a motorcycle in Rafah. My hair flies freely with filled-in, crunched-in exclamation marks. Gaza knows freedom comes with a steadfast love. I sit on a lake. I come from a lineage of land defenders. My eyes remain here, then return to Gaza beach, and my body longs for a jellyfish sting rolling in the sunset sand. My ears tremble in my aunt's house. I've heard rockets before I even knew what they were. More question marks, but I know that I left a girl from Gaza. Gazan girl, I am rising to let the world witness who I am. Writing an homage to my tears of gold, to every breath of soul Gaza has gifted me. Back rubs and healing tea, rooftop parties, rubble and no electricity, living and running bravely, eating from Teta's tree, surrounded by family, knowing your vile enemy. Gaza is greatly free, Gaza belongs to me, and I do not succumb to misery, even after the last moment of my unforgotten history.
على الفجار هيا قذيفي بالنار يا أحفاد صهيوني هيا قذيفي بالنار يا أحفاد صهيوني يا غزة الأحرار ثوري على الفجار.
Black and white scarf wrapped around your neck. Wear it in public and you can expect to walk the streets with a deep sense of fear, in a thick cloud of silence, but you can still hear a loud disdain for the people's persistence, for their right to exist, and for their resistance, for dignity and freedom and protecting their culture. Watch as open eyes get torn out by vultures. Watch eyes close as they try to look away. Watch actions speak louder than words they won't say. Look away, look away. Their truth has not changed. Starvation and suffering is not for the deranged. Swipe left, swipe right. Buy a latte, take a sip. Log into your account and book tickets for your next trip. Scroll past the dead babies, there's no need to look. You cannot yet handle having your whole truth shook. Stay silent, dear friends, this won't get much bigger. I don't want to talk about it, for me it's a trigger. If you just stay quiet, enough time will pass. This isn't the first conflict, and it won't be the last. Stay quiet, just look over there. At Beyonce's new video, don't you just love her hair? Don't Taylor and Travis make a beautiful pair? Then more children die, but why should you care? You're doing this for nothing, don't you know? And it isn't as though they have nowhere to go. Read a history book, we're so misunderstood. All governments are bad, but resistance is no good. I don't know enough to have an opinion. I just want peace in the end. Let the suffering stop for all innocent civilians. Why can't we all just be friends? Stay quiet while your dear friend cries, because 40 members of her family died. Your coworker cries in your private meeting. You scroll past starvation stories while you're eating. Send a half-hearted text as a peaceful ploy to further protect your circle of joy. Quickly change the subject, you just can't deal, when all you want is for your own wounds to heal. Drape once, drape twice, the scarf around your neck. Wake up to the world and no longer neglect. Wrap it once, wrap it twice, take a walk outside.
but keep your eyes open. Don't compartmentalize. My next poem is called Hide My Genocide. And, oh hey, it's Danana's. Will you hide my genocide? Ask me to forget my dead. Condemn the violence on both sides. Believe the news articles you've read. Do you support the words that brought you up? The same ones that broke me down? Do you stutter at my right to exist? Unless I agree, am I allowed? Will you hide the bodies of our children littering the ground? And swiftly move past my voice and stories without so much as a sound? And what will you do when my people and I go marching around the town? Will you hide our genocide with music and try to make us drown? Will you busy yourself with everyday life, with jokes and pictures of food, and jump on a wagon to only make statements on the most shocking news? Will you ever come back to my house to share some tea with me? Or are you saying that my people and I are undeserving of dignity? So while I still have some time up here, I'm not going to be reading any poetry, but I wanted to talk to you about this project that I was recently involved in. And this is a collection of stories by Palestinian families. This was just printed in Jordan. This was just published in Jordan. And it is the work of 48 different writers, myself included, produced by the very talented children's book author based in the UAE. She's of Palestinian descent as well. Her name is Dima Al-Alami. And we had illustrators donate to this, their works, 13 different illustrators, or 14 different illustrators. This was even printed by the generosity of 2 anonymous donors. Nobody has made any money off of this book. Everything is going to PCRF. The only people who are making any money off of this are the shipping companies. And unfortunately, it is very expensive to ship to Canada. So we're recommending that people order in groups. Aramex has agreed to send 5 at a time so that people can save on shipping costs. I am handing out bookmarks that have a QR code where you can order this. Definitely spread the word. And if I still have some time, I'd like to read an excerpt of the story that I contributed about my grandfather's exile from Palestine in 1948, his displacement story out of Haifa. And here's, you can see each page has an illustration of the city. We have Ramle, we have Al-Quds, Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Nasra, Lid. So yes, this is the story of my grandfather, Naif Mahmoud Dalloul. Jiddu Naif Mahmoud Dalloul was born and raised in Haifa, Palestine in 1929, where his family had lived since the late 1800s. He was the son of Mahmoud Ali Dalloul and Subhiya Abdel Fattah, a couple who owned properties in Haifa's Wadi al-Nisnas district. Jiddu Naif and his brother Fawzi were students at the Ramallah Friends School during the Nakba. While at school one day, in mid-April 1948, the 2 brothers learned that Haifa was occupied by the invading Zionist forces. Families were either being murdered or threatened to leave, to make room for the illegal settlers who would be taking over their homes. As Palestinian families were fleeing Haifa and its surrounding villages, and as towns were ethnically cleansed, Jiddu and Ammu Fawzi embarked on a hunt to find their parents. Their father had a house in Saida, Lebanon, so he drove their car with the rest of the family up there where they waited for the boys. There was no way to communicate or know for sure, and the brothers hoped and assumed that their family had fled and made it out of Haifa alive, expecting that they would head to Saida. The journey to Saida meant going through Jordan and crossing Syria to get to the south of Lebanon. Jiddu and Ammu Fawzi had to hitch rides and, according to family lore, walk long distances to pass through borders to get to Lebanon. On their way and through Lebanon, they stopped and asked people questions whenever possible about whether or not they saw their parents' car pass and which direction it was going. They eventually reunited with their father and the rest of their family. That's all I'll read. There's not much left, but it's fine. I also wanted to say that if there are any other Palestinians in the room, they are working on volume 2 of this book. So if you want to share your grandparents' stories, then you should definitely reach out to Dima and contribute. And we need to keep our stories alive. We need to keep them cemented because we are actively being erased. We have been erased for the past 75 years now, and this is the way. Our revolution is our pen, among other things, and that's something that we can do to keep it going. Habibti.
هيا قذيفي بالنار يا أحفاد صهيوني هيا قذيفي بالنار يا أحفاد صهيوني ولتأخذي بالثار يا غزاة الأطهار ولتأخذي بالثار يا غزاة الأطهار من غارات الكفار عباد أفيوني من غارات الكفار عباد أفيوني.
Well, I'm going to start with the poem by Refaat Alareer. And this was his last poem that he wrote. It's called If I Must Die. If I must die, you must live, to tell my story, to sell my things, to buy a piece of cloth and some strings, make it white with a long tail, so that a child somewhere in Gaza, while looking heaven in the eye, awaiting his dad who left in a blaze and bid no one farewell, not even to his flesh, not even to himself, sees the kite, my kite you made, flying up above, and thinks for a moment, an angel is there, bringing back love. If I must die, let it bring hope. Let it be a tale.
فليصمد الأبرار مهما قاوى التيار فليصمد الأبرار مهما قاوى التيار وسينصر الإسلام ويطيب زيتوني وسينصر الإسلام ويطيب زيتوني